Story number 1. Footprints in the Snow. It was the middle of winter, and the ground was covered in a blanket of thick, white snow that glittered in the sunlight. It resembled an alien planet with a floor made of diamonds. I decided to spend the winter at the lake house that my parents owned. The lake would be frozen solid, the pine trees would be capped in a layer of white, and I could spend the long, cold nights by a crackling fire. I had just broken up with my boyfriend that year. I really needed the break, which is why I begged my parents to let me use the lake house that winter. They were hesitant at first, worried about letting me stay there all by myself. I was adamant, and eventually they agreed. Most of my stay there went by without a problem. I was alone with my thoughts. Most of the time I was there, I was out on the lake, skating circles around myself on the surface. One day I headed out to the lake early. It was cold, and my breath turned to a fine layer of mist as it left my lips. I bundled up tightly, grabbed my skates, and made sure to lock the cabin on my way out. There's something about being by yourself, out in the middle of nowhere. You're completely alone. It's as if everyone else in the world is gone and you're the last one left. There's a certain feeling you get that lets you know that you are truly alone. That morning, I didn't have that feeling. I paused at the top of the steps leading down from the cabin's front door. There was a chill in the air. For a second, I felt like I was being watched. I turned my eyes to the edge of the tree line. A wall of trees surrounded me, with only one old dirt road leading through the forest. I don't know what I was expecting to see, but I kept an eye out for anything. Obviously, I didn't see anything, so I picked up my skates and continued on my way to the lake. I skated for most of the day. I took a break around lunchtime and ate the sandwich I had packed for myself. The later it got, the colder it got, so I headed back to the cabin just past midday while the sun was still in the sky. On my way back, I got that feeling again, like I was being watched. I glanced over my shoulder, scanning the tree line again, but I didn't see anything. I rolled my eyes at myself. I was beginning to think that my parents' silly stories were getting to me. I shook the thought out of my mind and ignored the feeling. When I began climbing up the stairs to the front door, I looked down and spotted them, footprints in the snow. That by itself doesn't seem weird at all. What made them weird was the fact that it was just one set of footprints leading from the path to underneath the window into the cabin's bedroom. There were no footprints leading back to the path, as if someone had just walked up to that spot and then vanished completely. The other weird thing about these footprints was that they were far too big to be mine. Panic set in. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and it wasn't from the cold. I looked all around me, scanning the tree line once again. This time I was looking for someone that I knew for certain was there. I rushed back inside the cabin, deadbolting the door behind me. The air in the cabin felt thick, and I struggled to breathe. I locked myself in the bathroom and sat for a while, trying to catch my breath. Someone must have been standing right outside, looking up at the bedroom window. I tried to figure out where they could have gone. Why were there no footprints leading away from the house? I gasped as the thought popped into my head. There weren't any footprints leading away from the house because they didn't leave. They were still there. At that moment, I heard a creak echo through the house. Heavy, slow footsteps sounded out in the bedroom, and he was heading towards me. I put my hands over my mouth and squeezed tight. I held my breath. I tried my hardest to keep as quiet as I could. Still, I was worried the intruder would hear my heart because it was beating so hard. The footsteps walked in front of the bathroom door as a shadow poured in through the gap beneath the door. He stopped. The wooden floor squeaked as the intruder turned to face the door. There was silence for a moment, and then the doorknob turned. I closed my eyes. For such a long time, there was no sound. At some point, the shadow beneath the door had disappeared. I didn't hear him leave. I stayed where I was well into the night, cuddling myself in the far corner of the bathtub, shivering as the snow began to fall outside once again. I'm not sure how long I was lying there, but in the morning I heard a car door slam shut. It jolted me awake. The next thing I heard was my mother's voice, calling out for me. Tears formed a waterfall down my cheeks as I rushed out of the cabin to meet them. They had tried to contact me for a while, but I didn't answer since I didn't have my phone with me in the bathroom. So thankfully, they drove down to the cabin to see if I was okay. I still don't know what happened to the man at the bathroom door. He had broken in through the bedroom window and was waiting there for me to come back. If I hadn't seen those footprints in the snow, he would have caught me completely off guard. I don't know what he would have done to me. Story number 2. Whistling. I was 13 years old, and by that point, I was used to being left home alone. My father died when I was young, and my mother worked 2 jobs. She spent all day working as a waitress in a diner down the road, and at night she worked as an assistant in a hospital on the other side of town. I usually only got to see her when I got home from school at the end of the day while she was getting ready for her next job. She really trusted me to look after myself. When I was really young, she would get a babysitter. We couldn't really afford it though, so when I was old enough, I told her that I would be okay by myself. Anyway, most nights when I was home alone, it would be uneventful. I would heat up a TV dinner for myself and watch a few shows or a movie while I ate. I'd get ready for bed early during the weekdays, but on the weekends I'd usually try to stay up so I could see my mother when she got home. One weekend, it was well past midnight and I was still up. My mother had already called the house and told me she was going to be later than usual. I didn't mind staying up later. I was in the kitchen making popcorn for my next movie when I first heard it. I heard a whistling sound. It was soft and seemed as if it was echoing down the street from far away. I turned the microwave off and listened closely. The popping sound from my popcorn stopped. The whistling seemed to be moving, as if someone was walking down the road. I shrugged and went back to my popcorn. I didn't think anything of it at first. People go for late-night walks all the time. I figured the whistling would go away once the man walked past my house. I was wrong. I sat down with my popcorn and turned the movie on. It was hard to pay attention. A few minutes had gone by, but the whistling was still there. In fact, it had gotten louder. I decided to get up and have a look. There were these small windows on the side of the front door. I hid my body behind the door and peeked through one of the windows. At first, it just seemed foggy outside. The only light was the soft, warm glow from the few streetlights that I could see. I paused when I noticed a silhouette under one of them. The silhouette was that of a tall, slender man with a wide-brimmed hat and long waistcoat. It didn't take me long to realize that he was the one whistling. He was just standing there, beneath the streetlight, whistling. I stepped out from behind the door so I could get a better look. I leaned closer to the window, but I leaned in too far. My forehead smacked against the glass, and a thud echoed out. The whistling stopped and the man's head snapped toward me. He marched towards my house. His silhouette disappeared as he stepped out of the halo of light into the darkness. I backed away from the door. I could almost hear his footsteps stomping down the cobblestone path outside my house. He walked straight up to my front door, and he knocked. That knock thundered through the house. I thought the ground was shaking, but it was just my knees knocking together. I was frozen in place. I couldn't move. The sound of my chattering teeth filled the silence that followed the knock. The whistling started up again. This time, it was so loud, I thought it was coming from inside the house. I gasped, and my hands shot up to cover my ears. I still couldn't move, frozen to the spot. That whistling didn't stop. It kept going well into the night. I'm not sure when it stopped. All I know is that when my mother got home, she found me asleep on the floor in the hallway in front of the door. She was worried and thought I was sick. I stayed in bed the next day while she checked my temperature and made me soup. I didn't tell her about the whistling man. She worried about a lot of things. She couldn't afford to worry about leaving me at home by myself. I still flinch whenever I hear someone whistling. Story number 3. In the Walls. Throughout my childhood, I had noticed things going missing in the house. It wasn't anything that was cause for concern. The last biscuit in the packet would go missing, or the leftovers in the kitchen would be eaten. Everyone in the family would deny taking it. Still, everyone just thought that someone must have taken it. It wasn't anything sinister. One day during summer break, I wasn't keen on doing anything. I was hot and I was feeling lazier than ever. My parents packed up my younger sisters and took them to the pool. I was 15 and used to staying at home alone, so they left me in my bedroom, listening to my music and reading my magazines. I heard the front door close and put my headphones on. I stayed in my room for about an hour. It was too hot to move, but my rumbling stomach told me it wasn't too hot to get a snack from the kitchen. I took off my headphones and slid off the edge of my bed. Before my feet had even touched the ground, I heard a rumbling sound. It was coming from the kitchen. At first, I thought that my parents had come home from the pool, but then I would have heard my little sisters running around the house. I would have heard the TV on in the living room. Instead, all I heard was someone rummaging through the cupboards in the kitchen. My heart splashed into the pit of my stomach. Someone was in my house. I slowly climbed off my bed and headed for my bedroom door. I don't know why I didn't call the police there and then. I guess a part of me wanted to make sure it wasn't my parents. I tried to open my door slowly and step out into the hallway. The plan was to sneak down the stairs and peek around the corner into the kitchen. I didn't get that far. As I pushed my door open, the old rusty hinges let out a long, loud moan that echoed through the whole house. I flinched, and the sound in the kitchen stopped. The next thing I heard were footsteps scampering across the wooden floors and a loud bang as a cupboard door slammed closed. For a moment, I couldn't move. I blinked my eyes slowly, slightly confused by what just happened. I decided to continue with my plan. I clutched my phone, my finger hovering over the dial button and the number for the police punched in. Each step I took down the stairs seemed like it could be my last. I reached the bottom stair. I took a deep breath and peeked around the corner. The kitchen was empty, but all the cupboard doors and the fridge had been left open. I shook my head as I stepped into the kitchen. My first thought was raccoons, but the more I thought about it, it didn't make any sense. I started closing up cupboards and putting things away. I reached for the fridge door when, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted someone peeking at me from inside one of the cupboards. I froze on the spot, my hand still reaching out for the fridge door. There were eyes shining in the dark of one of the cupboards. It was the creepiest thing I ever saw. A man was hiding in the cupboards beneath the sink, staring at me. My brain kicked into action. It was fight or flight, and I chose flight. My feet took off running before I knew what was happening. I ran up the stairs and into my room, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me. I called the police and hid under my bed until I heard their sirens driving up the road. To this day, I still don't believe what happened next. There was a man living inside the walls. They found him in a gap behind the kitchen wall. I told them where I saw the eyes, and they found a hole in the back of the cupboard under the kitchen sink. It looked like the man had been living there for years. All the things that went missing, we found inside his little home behind the wall. He'd spent years waiting for us to leave the house so he could come out and take food and whatever else he needed from us. It still makes my skin crawl thinking about how some stranger was living inside the walls of my house for years and I didn't even know it.